Hi, and welcome to another edition of our People First interview series, where we shine a light on great companies that not only do interesting and cool work, but most importantly, look after their people. Identify Global is a market leader in personalized career management and talent acquisition, specializing in the legal tech and legal services market with great candidate experience guaranteed. Check out identifyglobal.com for more information and the roles that we cover. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Stéphanie Hamon, Head of Legal Consulting for Norton Rose Fulbright and co-founder of the Bionic Lawyer project. And if that were not enough to keep her busy, she also owns a beagle, just like me. Norton Rose Fulbright is an international law firm. It's the second largest law firm in the United States and one of the 10 largest in the world, both by lawyers and revenue. Stéphanie, thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And thank you for inviting me here, Peter.
No, it's fantastic to have you on. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm normally and should be based in London, but in anticipation of the first lockdown back in March, 11 months ago, we came back home, and home is in France, Brittany. So that's where I've been for the past 11 months. I thought I'd be there for a few weeks, but I don't despair. At some point, I'll be back in London.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, I think you're our first. I had one that was in South Africa, but again, like you, normally in London, but went back to South Africa. So, yeah, it's nice to have some international conversations going on. So, tell us about you, Stéphanie. What do you do when you're not leading Norton Rose consulting practice? How do you relax? What do you do? I know you've got a beagle, so probably not much relaxing.
No, it's going probably to sound a bit boring, but because I'm building a new practice, a lot of my time is actually spent doing that. So there's not a lot of time outside of that, but that's not really a problem because I'm really passionate about it. And what I found really interesting, what gives me a drive as well, is meeting a lot of people, chatting about their challenges, what they've been doing, and how we can share best practices. So that's been really keeping me busy for the last 18 months. Otherwise, I guess like you would expect, your typical French, really family orientated, food and wine. And in the last 11 months with lockdown, nothing like a good fire in the fireplace and a nice bottle of wine and a book. That always does the trick.
Sounds
that
like
was
heaven.
Trying to walk a beagle.
Yeah. Sounds like heaven to me. So what? Tell us what is the Bionic Lawyer? Tell us a bit more about that.
So that's and actually you mentioned a South African lady was there earlier. It's Janet, and Janet Tellerhall is also a Bionic Lawyer contributor. So the Bionic Lawyer project was started as is fit around a lunch with Stephen Allen, who was at the time at Hogan Lovells, is now at Elevate, and Rob Booth with the GC of the Crown Estate. And it's just because we were sharing the same vision that collaboration in the legal industry could really help some of the systemic problem, rather than everybody trying to always compete with each other and reinvent the wheel. And that there was a way to design the legal industry to try and make it a more inclusive place, a more collaborative place where everybody can be a winner. So that sounds very high level, but behind that, there's a number of what we call levers. There are 16 of them that we feel if people action those levers, they'll be able to maximize value for themselves and for their organization. Okay. And there's a lot of work that has been done by over 500 contributors to the project to try and shape what these levers look like and how we can put them in action. So if you're interested, there's a big community on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can always get in touch with me, Stephen and Rob, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it. Wow, it's all open coded, by the way. The idea is that we're not doing it for ourselves. It's really for the benefit of everyone.
Fantastic. I mean, that's quite interesting because I mean, like a lot of people that come on this show are, ex-lawyers and they've moved into legal tech or they've got, they're working in some role within the legal profession. But you're not, are you? So you're not, a typical, legal background, if you like, if you don't mind me saying. So how did you enter the legal profession and why? I mean, because you're very passionate about it.
Yeah, I have to be honest, it was by accident. I moved to the UK with my, at the time, fiance, now husband. And I was trying to find a job in London, and I needed to practice my English, who wasn't really good at the time. I had a really strong French accent. And one of the agencies said, oh, we've got an opening with a law firm. Do you want to go there? I'm like, I've got no. And at the time I was looking more for like marketing roles, so quite different. And so I've got no idea what marketing you do in a law firm. Bear in mind that was over 20 years ago. But I need to practice my English, so I'll go anyway. And it just so happened I really liked the person I met, who remained a mentor for a long time after that. She also was Francophile, which I think helped with the accent thing. And that's how I joined, at the time, Linklatter's graduate program. They had a program for their business services.
Yeah.
And the rest is history, because it's been over 20 years now working with and for lawyers. I tried a few years outside of legal, and then I realized that everything that drove me away and drove me nuts as a non-lawyer.
Yeah.
So the lack of recognition, the the fact that people would tend to concentrate more on the format rather than content. So you would present something to a partner, and first thing, very cliche, red pen out, and double spacing there, capitalized letter here, and without looking at the content, and always urgent. And then I realized, moving to a different industry, that actually there was a really positive side to it all, which is that drive for excellence, that drive for perfection, always being top of your game. And I realized I actually like and enjoy working in a pressurized environment with deadline. So I came back. So that's how I ended up in the legal industry. Wow. And it's over 20 years now working with and for lawyers. Some say that probably makes me a somewhat I don't know, masochist, somebody that likes to suffer, or, on the positive, somebody that's really resilient. But I've learned a lot, I think, in that time around change management and how you get people to buy into an idea that might not be theirs to start with, and might come from a very different angle than they used to, because I'm coming at it, of course, not as a lawyer, but as somebody with a business background. And I think that has become one of my strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and now you head up, legal consulting for NRF. So for those that are listening, that are not quite sure what that is, can you explain what your business unit does and your role?
Sure. So I've done a number of years, both in law firm, but also on the client side within in-house function. And what really became clear to me is that when you're a in-house function, of course, you need to manage legal risk, and that's your primary role. But there's growing importance around acting as a business partner and running your function like a business. But legal functions tend to be filled with lawyers only, or mostly. And therefore, there's a gap in terms of skill set, knowledge, and expertise around how do you interact as a business partner? What are the tools? What are the processes? What is the language that you can bring to bear? So it's about bringing business discipline and financial rigor to how you run a legal department. So the idea of the legal operations consulting practice is that we're now helping our clients, of course, manage legal risk, and that's what NRF lawyers have been doing for over a few centuries now. And now we can help them on the other side of the coin of their role, which is being that business partner and managing the function like a business. So legal ops is everything a GC will need to do that has got nothing with providing legal advice. That's really the best way to describe it.
Wow. Okay, that's okay. So you face off to in-house legal teams and partner with and help them partner with NRF services across the board. Yeah. Okay. And so how big is your function? How many people do you manage and look after?
So what we have within NRF is what we call NRF Transform, and that's our innovation vehicle. It's a little bit like a startup within a bigger organization. So I'd often describe myself as an intrapreneur. So I would say I have all of the great sides of being an entrepreneur, but kind of the safety of operating in a bigger environment. So I get the best of both worlds. And what we do really is all the way from strategic management consultant advice. So advising GC, for instance, on their strategy for the next 5 years, looking at their location strategy, resourcing strategy, technology strategy, but all the way down through to implementation. So
say we're advising on their technology strategy and roadmap, we can also then help them with automating certain contract types. So it's both the practical implementation and the kind of strategic advice. And to do that, we're a team in EMEA, A for NRF being Asia rather than Africa, and that's one of our OT. But over 150 people split between, well, in the before were Newcastle and London, Newcastle being our innovation hub. And within those 150 people, we have a great breadth of skill sets. We've got legal design, legal technologist, we've got legal project manager, resource manager, pricing, and so on and so forth. So I'm being able to mobilize the right skill set and the right individual to deliver the project for the client, depending on what the needs are. So that is a really great setup for me.
Yes, a huge, like you say, a huge startup sort of style function, but with huge resources for you to draw upon. So yeah, fantastic. So perhaps you can give us an idea then of because your function is quite unique in sense, and how you operate. So what have been your biggest people challenges over the last 12 months, and perhaps perhaps you can share some of those with the listeners.
Yeah, so I think there's been people challenges for my practice in particular, and more broadly, I think for the transport team or for NRF. I think to me personally, in terms of the biggest people challenges, as you highlighted, what I do is still pretty unique. So it's finding and identifying the right talent that I can bring on board, and that would have almost complementary skill set to help build this solution for clients. And I think, if the case needs to be done still for D&I, that for me, having a diversity of thought and therefore background and skill set is critical to develop the best solution for the client. So it's trying to bring that diversity into my team, so we can really almost have our creative juice flowing and really coming up with those. So in the current context with COVID, it's been harder to maybe access those people that you would normally otherwise, I don't know, meet at conferences or through networking events or this kind of ad hoc encounters. So reaching out, identifying the people and then bringing back in has been challenging. I think then, of course, a big challenge we all found is the training element.
Okay.
And how do you allow for people to train? A lot of what we do within Transform is new. It's a new skill set, and it's important that we train our people. We also have a very interesting scheme, which is called our business and legal operations trainee. So we almost reproduce the legal trainee scheme, but for legal operations purpose. So they have 4 seats rotation across different teams in Transform. It is hard to onboard new people totally virtually and get them feel part of a team.
Yeah.
And the challenge as well is, at the moment, we're all spending our time in front of a screen, and the only way you can get training is also through a screen. But when you've already spent X number of hours looking at your screen, the desire and the motivation to spend another extra 2 hours maybe doing training is not really there. I mean, I hold up my hand. I'm the first one guilty. Is like, really can't be bothered. And I think we need to be careful not to let that kind of training and continuous development fall by the wayside as a collateral victim of the current situation. So I'd say that's probably has been one of the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and I think people have got a sort of, I don't know, they got so focused on trying to give people lots to do, haven't they, to keep them busy, and actually not understanding that people still need a break even in these times. They still need to have some downtime, but they do. People still love to learn, and having that opportunity to develop themselves is still important. But it's about getting that balance right, as you say. So perhaps, what have you done to overcome that then, and what initiatives have you implemented to support your people and your culture in that way?
So we've tried a number of things, and I can't claim we've got the perfect solution.
Sure.
I think we keep trying a number of things, and you almost need to renew as well. It's a little bit like keeping that culture and that team bonding. We have, for instance, this regular weekly meeting, but I think we changed format and content
probably 6 times already in the last 11 months, just to keep things interesting and keep people motivating, and it's not kind of the dull and the routine. And the same with training. We're trying different things. Actually, just yesterday, this is quite timely, we were having a broader team conversation around what's working, what's not working. And there's a couple of things we want to try now. So what we realized is that maybe agreeing to do a training with someone else, so almost like buddying up, is an extra motivation, because then it's not just you that has to do it. You can do it and share it with someone else. And kind of replicate that almost that classroom environment.
Yeah.
We're using a great platform called Udemy, and there's a lot of things you can do that are interactive and you can do as a group or as a duet. So that's quite helpful. And we've tried a different way of prioritizing. So saying to people, you need to ring fence 2 hours of your week. But the challenge that the team was telling us is that, well, it's great, but if you're the only one ring fencing, say 2 hours first thing in the afternoon on a Tuesday, but everyone else is working, you still get the distraction. So one of the suggestions that came from the team, and we're going to trial, is having a set day a month where everybody will be doing training. So whether it's a day or a half day, we don't know yet, but knowing that the entire Transform team will be dedicating that time for training. And therefore, you don't feel like while you're doing your training, then people keep working and you've got your emails coming in and you're being interrupted and so on and so forth, and kind of get a little bit of that group training as well at the same time to try and improve the tech up on it. So that's the kind of small things we're trying to do, but it's really trial and error, if I'm being honest.
Of course, and I think the important thing there is that you're asking the question, and even just changing it around, I think is effective in itself, because if you're having the same, everyone has weekly meetings, right? And but if you keep doing the same thing every week just to keep it up, yes, there's a benefit of doing that, and I don't want to sort of play down anyone that's having weekly meetings, and because they are important, but changing the format, changing the style, just seeing what works, I think is a great initiative in itself. And it's different, right? Because when you're in the office, you've got everyone's attention, and you say, right, we're all going to go into a meeting for an hour, and and it's just easier. But when people are working from home and you've got flexible working styles, everybody's got different needs and different wants. So, I mean, would you say that, with that in mind, would you say that your culture has changed? And is it changing? And do you think, what does that look like now?
So again, very timely. One thing we realized as well is that despite COVID, we've kept growing, and we've had a number of new joiners in the last 11 months.
Okay.
And how do you ensure that you help people embed themselves and get under the skin of what we really are when it's all virtual? So one thing and one exercise we just literally started, and is going to run for a number of meetings, but there are tools out there. One of them is called a cultural canvas that we are actually filling in as a team to understand what are our objectives, but also what are our norms, what are the behavior, how is our decision-making process, and kind of getting everybody to contribute and fill in that cultural canvas, which will help crystallize and almost write into a charter about what are we about, what is our essence, and that is one of the way we found that we could actually convey to new people, but also reaffirm to existing people that this is what we're all about.
Yeah.
I think what has been interesting for us is almost putting us to the test, because of course internally we're known as the change agents, but we kind of had to almost lead by the example and say, well, we keep telling you need to change. Well, here's how we're adapting to change. So for instance, we were the first team to pilot the use of Teams. So we're having this call on Teams now.
Yeah.
But we were one of the first teams to pilot Teams,
Yeah.
and kind of feeding that back into the broader business, and just again leading by the example, and also keeping in tune with what we're all about. Just always trying to find these new ways of working to make things more. So it's not just new for the sake of new, right? It's about innovation is all about new, but for efficiency, and that's what we're trying to be about. So. And it's about, I think, celebrating success, which sometimes is harder to do when you're remote, because you can't have the traditional, okay, well, let's all go to the pub and, we'll have a drink together to celebrate this or that, or that promotion or that deal. So it's finding ways to replace that. So I don't think the culture has changed, but I think it requires probably a rethinking and a reinventing about how to maintain it. And it's not just us. I mean, I've had a number of conversations with GCs, with CEO around how they see the future of working, and in particular the use of offices and headquarters. And a lot of CEOs are thinking along the lines of, you know, the office won't be the place you go to every day to do work. The office will be the place you go to actually meet with your colleagues, socialize, and maintain that culture, and also the training element. So it will be interesting to see what comes out of that. But
Yeah.
I think culture is always what, for me, is what helps differentiate you from your competition. That's one of the
Okay.
reasons I picked NRF over some other law firm to develop my business.
Yeah.
But it's harder to maintain in an entirely virtual world.
Yeah. Do you think have you had to adapt the way you lead then, you know, in today's environment? And have you learned anything about yourself?
Oh, that's a tough question. I learned that there's only so long I can go with watching at my face in the screen. I think that's one, because indeed, in my role, I probably spend my entire day on Zoom calls or Teams calls, talking to clients, talking to teams.
Yeah.
And again, during our last team meeting, we're talking about the virtual meeting etiquette and how a lot of people, well, sometimes for good reason, because you've got connection issue and so on and so forth, but they don't turn on their camera. And it's really hard to keep the energy up when you're basically looking at a black screen, which is a little picture of your face
Yeah.
on the sign. So I think what I learned about myself is I'm more resilient than I thought I was. So I think that that's a positive. And in terms of what I learned that I needed to do differently is pace myself, because initially, you know, my PA was joking because my days were literally back to back, one meeting after the next, and I would end up the day being completely drained. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, actually, you know what, that can't go on forever. There needs to be a bit more of a balance. So it was a bit of work, because I find it hard to say no to people when they ask for time, but it's something I had to learn, because it's also about making time for yourself, because if you're not good within yourself, you can't help others either.
Yeah.
And I think it's that importance of having regular checkpoint with your team, but not just to talk about the to-do list or the priorities. It's also that kind of informal social chit chat. And you know what, if you don't get to your to-do list, it's okay, because you need to find a way to keep that empathy bond and that kind of personal touch.
Have you found any benefits from this way? I mean, you know, as you said, it's easy now. There's no gaps in between meetings anymore, is there? It's like boom, 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 one to the next. Before, you could, you know, even if it was just traveling to the next meeting, you know, you would have an hour to yourself to, you know, listen to music in the car or whatever. You know, remember when that was a thing? You know, I remember driving and listening to my own music. That's something I miss. But you know, have you found any positives in terms of, you know, work-life balance? You know, family. You know, I know my beagle, for example, is getting more walks than he used to, so yeah, he's happier than I am.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, and I can't complain. I'm lucky to live in a great part of the world. I'm literally 100 yards from the seafront, so the beagle's getting walks on the beach in the morning. So, you know, really, I'd be hard pressed to complain about anything. I still have a job. I've got a roof on my head.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of positive, and I think number of positive would be, first is that it's finally I think it's been an accelerator for change and adoption of new ways of working. I think there were still organization and definitely culture, you know, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm French, where home working, flexible working wasn't really a thing. And even within law firm, I mean, just earlier this week, I was speaking to one of our partners. You know, I've been honest about it. I wasn't one that was for remote working. I really didn't think it could work. People were as efficient. And say, well, now I've tried it, I fear the day I have to go back in the office. So I think that has really helped convince people that this is possible. It also helped with the change in ways of working. So I was mentioning teams earlier. And it's funny because, again, in my role, I should be one of the early adopters. but I was still working on email, exchanging documents and versioning and so on and so forth. Now I've started Teams. Don't take it away from me. I don't think I could work. I can't even fathom now how we were working without it before, producing document, collaborating. So I think in that sense, you were asking about culture earlier, and I was mentioning training. Thanks to Teams, we have been able to, like, I've got a rotating trainee in my team, and they've been able to be fully part of the conversation and contribute to things thanks to the tool. So there's also some silver lining here, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. And just for clarity, we're not doing an advert for Teams. Other platforms are available.
Sorry.
no, it's
True.
good, and it was so good. It sounded like a sales pitch for Teams, but hopefully they might get this and ask you to take part. But but I mean, it's an interesting point, and I think and you've touched on it there about being able to collaborate with your team members and things like that. So do you think that then, with the adoption of this technology and, the more companies being, allowing remote working, home working, whatever it is, do you think that presents better opportunities for you, or perhaps challenges for recruiting, better people into your, not better people, but more, more diverse, but, the boundaries have gone, haven't they? You don't have to recruit within, your 20-mile radius or whatever it is from your office. You can recruit the best people wherever they are in the world effectively.
Yeah. So, again, being French, the way we tend to look at things are the pros and the cons, and then we kind of make a decision. I think there's indeed a lot to say for this allowing for greater diversity, and you're going to be able to recruit from a bigger pool, and distance and physical presence is not going to be as much of a barrier as it was, which will also help with, certain rural areas probably getting more, movement of population, so on and so forth. It's great.
Yeah.
But I think the flip side of it is also for people looking for a job, the competition has become bigger.
Yeah.
Because now you're not just competing against people that are in a 20 miles radius, you're competing against everybody. So I think it's great. You have access to more job opportunities, but you also have more people, that could go for this job. And I don't have the data. I don't have the math to know whether the opportunities outweigh the competition. And I guess the answer would be different from business to business and roles to roles. But I think we need to be just mindful of that as recruiter. And I think people need to be aware of it as they're applying for jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, maybe I'm just a romantic, but I think that everybody has an opportunity to go after the organization or, the role that they really want, to go and work for the company that suits them from a culture. I mean, we talked about it earlier, you chose NRF for a reason. And I think that allows people to do that now and want to go and work. And I think as organizations adopt a more culture-based approach, to their recruitment, recruiting people that are right for them as opposed to just for a job, I think, will make people happier in their jobs. I hope so. And hope that's one of the the positives to take from this. And and I've talked about it a lot, with diversity and neurodiversity as well. There are people that are fantastic at jobs, but for whatever the reason, their condition, they're not suitable for working in an office environment. Technology allows people to work somewhere where they're comfortable, whether that's because they're physically impaired or because their autism doesn't like bright lights or smells or whatever it is. People are allowed to take on roles that they couldn't previously even dream of. So it's fantastic that you're sharing the benefits of that as well. So in that mind, then, given the new world of work and how people are operating, and what are your customers demanding most from you right now? Has that changed from what it was before, or is it more of the same but just being delivered differently?
So I think there's two trends that I've noticed. One is indeed with some clients, COVID acting as an accelerator for change. So people who said, we always wanted to get to this, but never really saw that as a priority. So I'll give you an example, e-signature. people I thought, okay, for contract, we could be and should be moving to e-signature. It was on their project list, but kind of never got run to it. Well, COVID has kind of accelerated that and so it's been a great enabler in certain aspects. A lot of the other conversation I'm having is really with leadership team who say, we need to find ways, and it's not just tools, but ways to really put our arms around our teams and understand better what it is they're working on, how busy they are, because you don't have those water cooler moments anymore, or you just informal conversation when you just drop by and say, how is it going? You know, what's happening with this project, that matter. And as a leader of a team, having that kind of holistic view of what it is that your team is working on, what are they busy with, what is a potential risk and liabilities you're managing, you know, having that visibility is becoming really critical. One, to be able to support your team properly and make sure that indeed you don't have people that are quite quiet in a corner but are completely droning. But also in order to manage your function properly and then interact with the business to be sure that what it is your function is delivering is still fit for purpose and supporting the strategy of your organization. So a lot of the conversation at the moment are around processes and governance and tools to help leaders of legal function to try and get their arms around what it is the team is doing at the moment for all of the reasons I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I think that's important, and you know, there's so much going on, but also it's easy to hide, isn't it, in today's world in terms of and you know, be that individual. If you're not someone, you know, some people have got used to being on teams and getting involved and stuff, but you know, it's also easy to hide behind you know, remote working and so yeah, it's how have you helped your customers, you know, in that sense? Have you had to support your customers in different ways, and yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of people had to quickly move into crisis mode, and a lot of them have needed quick wins, help under pressure. But often what has happened is budget were cut, and consultant budget tends to be the first one that is being cut out. So there's been a number of instances where kind of come to me and say, look, we don't have a budget, but we really need some advice. And here it's been kind of, you know, I'm a firm believer in what goes around comes around. So it's about helping. I believe that if you help people through a difficult time, at some point you will get the payback. So it's about the long term and the relationship. So I guess that's how I've been trying to do my part.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely. And you know, as a business owner myself, you know, we've been in that situation where we've just had to reach out and say we need some help. You know, like you, recruitment is always the first thing to go in a downturn. You know, it's one of the easiest things they can control. So you know, and our suppliers were brilliant, and you know, they've helped us out. And you know, don't mind saying that had they not helped us out, you know, who knows where we would have been, you know, today. So you know, so I think it's important that, and you know, you're absolutely right. What goes around comes around, because guess what? You know, when things are all good again, you know, where am I going to spend my money? I'm going to spend it with the people that helped me first, aren't I? So yeah, that's I think that's really important. So some quick fire questions I always try and finish off with, and you know, the whole point of this is to shine a light on great companies like yourself and great leaders like yourself. So quick fire questions then. Are you recruiting at the minute?
We are. There's a number of roles and skill set, whether it's technologist or process design or even legal ops consultant. So we're always on the lookout. And sometimes I'd say to people, don't wait for a job advert to be there, because sometimes you can create your own opportunity, especially in this type of environment we're in. So reach out if you're interested and has a question.
Fantastic. So for those that are interested in reaching out to you, what does leadership mean to you?
I think leadership is setting the long-term vision and then creating a safe environment for people to try and achieve that vision, and making it clear that failure is fine. That it's about, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity in the world at the moment, and there's a lot of unknown. And one of my former boss, he was at the GC of Barclays, you know, used often the phrase "thriving in ambiguity." And I think that's the role of a leader at the moment, is helping your team navigating these very uncertain times and helping them thrive in that ambiguity.
Fantastic. And what piece of advice would you give your peers navigating this period?
Just find a trust circle. People you feel you can talk to. Don't feel you have to come up with all of the answers yourself. Everybody's having good times and bad times, and it's there's no such thing as being able to talk to someone that's been through or is going through the same thing, and just it helps give you a bit of perspective.
Fantastic. Stephanie, that was really, really fantastic. I could talk to you for hours. So sadly, we only have a limited amount of time. But thank you very much for your time. And if you're listening to this and interested in what Stephanie has to say, then please reach out to her or look at the NRF jobs page and see what roles exist within her team. I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you or answer any questions you may have. And yeah, that was really fantastic. So have a good weekend, Stephanie, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Well, thank you, Peter, for having me. It was great, and good luck with the rest of the podcast series.
Thank you.